The topic I chose for my final video was pollution. Today I wanted to discuss the issue of pollution and the human impacts on the environment. National Geographic describes pollution as the introduction of harmful materials into the environment. Pollution damages the quality of land, air, and water, all of the things we humans need to sustain life. If the environment around us is negatively affected, then we too are negatively affected. That is why the conversation of pollution is so important. There are many factors that contribute to air pollution. They include vehicles like large trucks, factories, pesticides, and even natural disasters. Carpooling became a big counter to air pollution. Multiple people headed to the same location or sharing a ride instead of driving separately. Cars release carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas that increases in city traffic. However, the movement of large trucks carrying big loads still occurs. Factories output so much into the atmosphere and are a main contributor to the negatives in the air. Factories release nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrocarbons that become visible forms of air pollution through smog or smoke. Cities like Los Angeles and New York are perfect examples of visible air pollution. Pesticides are sprayed onto produce to prevent bugs and animals from affecting crop. Well, the pesticides are affecting people, plants, and animals in a negative way. Pesticides have made people ill and killed the masses just by being a preventative measure. Today, regulations have been put in place to reduce the use of deadly pesticides, but there are still strides. DDT, a once commonly used pesticide, is now banned in the United States. In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, along with the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. Developments like the EPA have made changes to correct and prevent pollution. There has been a reduction of waste, and polluters are held accountable for the sickness and destruction they cause. The EPA has to be one of the greatest developments in the environmental movement. It is no secret that natural disasters can occur at random. Volcanoes release ash and other gases into the atmosphere, which quickly increases the amount of pollutants in the air. Volcanic gases can kill. There are famous eruptions like Mount Vesuvius in Italy that killed hundreds of residents in Pompeii. That is one example of a natural form of pollution, but most forms of air pollution are not. Fossil fuels are another large contributor. The burning of coal, oil, and natural gas is not helping at all. These pollutants cycle back through the water cycle when nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide mix with moisture and produce acid rain. This rain falls back to earth and in turn kills trees and ruins water sources like lakes, streams, rivers. Fish can no longer live in these bodies of water. This segues me perfectly into the issue of water pollution. Water pollution is tricky because sometimes the water looks dirty and smells bad. Other times the water looks fine, but that does not necessarily mean that the water is safe. Pollutants in the water make it unsafe to drink, bathe in, or swim in. It can cause disease and make people sick. It is dangerous because people can become sick indirectly from water pollution. For example, if a person ate a fish that lived in contaminated water, they are now exposed to water pollution. Similarly to the air, there is the human contribution that adds to the toxic conditions of the water around us. Oil, natural gases, and other chemicals can leak into the water supply from factories and chemical plants, ruining the water supply. Now, blue-green algae can thrive, which kills life in the water, causing them to become dead zones. Mining and drilling for oil and coal is also not helpful. Garbage and litter, pretty common among Americans, is a big problem. Things float into the ocean and kill sea life and do not disintegrate. Plastic bottles and plastic byproducts become part of the sea, and the pollutants of the bottles wash into the water, changing it and making it unsafe for the animals to sustain life.
8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the sea from land every year, the equivalent of 5 plastic bags filled with trash for every foot of coastline in the world. Across our ocean, plastic trash flows into circulation, dispersed almost everywhere, but concentrating in huge swaths in the midst of global currents, breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, ingested by species across the marine world, and sinking to the bottom of the sea.
This is the story of 3 plastic bottles, empty and discarded. Their journeys are about to diverge, with outcomes that impact nothing less than the fate of the planet. But they weren't always this way. To understand where these bottles end up, we must first explore their origins. The heroes of our story were conceived in this oil refinery. The plastic in their bodies was formed by chemically bonding oil and gas molecules together to make monomers. In turn, these monomers were bonded into long polymer chains to make plastic, in the form of millions of pellets. Those were melted at manufacturing plants and reformed in molds to create the resilient material that makes up the triplets' bodies. Machines filled the bottles with sweet, bubbly liquid, and they were then wrapped, shipped, bought, opened, consumed, and unceremoniously discarded. And now here they lie, poised at the edge of the unknown. Bottle 1, like hundreds of millions of tons of his plastic brethren, ends up in a landfill. This huge dump expands each day as more trash comes in and continues to take up space. As plastics sit there being compressed amongst layers of other junk, rainwater flows through the waste and absorbs the water-soluble compounds it contains, and some of those are highly toxic. Together, they create a harmful stew called leachate, which can move into groundwater, soil, and streams, poisoning ecosystems and harming wildlife. It can take Bottle 1 an agonizing 1,000 years to decompose. Bottle 2's journey is stranger, but unfortunately no happier. He floats on a trickle that reaches a stream that flows into a river, and a river that reaches the ocean. After months lost at sea, he's slowly drawn into a massive vortex where trash accumulates, a place known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Here, the ocean's currents have trapped millions of pieces of plastic debris. This is one of 5 plastic-filled gyres in the world's seas, places where the pollutants turn the water into a cloudy plastic soup. Some animals, like seabirds, get entangled in the mess. They and others mistake the brightly colored plastic bits for food. Plastic makes them feel full when they're not, so they starve to death and pass the toxins from the plastic up the food chain. For example, it's eaten by lanternfish. The lanternfish are eaten by squid. The squid are eaten by tuna. And the tuna are eaten by us. And most plastics don't biodegrade, which means they're destined to break down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, which might rotate in the sea eternally. But Bottle 3 is spared the cruel purgatories of his brothers. A truck brings him to a plant where he and his companions are squeezed flat and compressed into a block. Okay, this sounds pretty bad too, but hang in there. It gets better. The blocks are shredded into tiny pieces, which are washed and melted so they become the raw materials that can be used again. As if by magic, Bottle 3 is now ready to be reborn as something completely new. For this bit of plastic with such humble origins, suddenly, the sky is the limit.
The video discussed recycling, which is beneficial to the environment and the well-being of the environment and everyone affected by the environment. It is a perfect counter to plastic pollution, and every little bit counts. One of the main realizations about pollution is that most of it is affected by the human impact on Earth. And It is our duty to take care of the earth that is given to us and make changes to our lifestyles in order to slow down what is now known as climate change or global warming by other people. Um, it's our duty to step up to the plate and recycle and use reusable water bottles because plastic pollution has been a main contributor to a lot of the issues we encounter day to day. Carpooling, that I discussed earlier in the video, is great for air pollution and the decrease of smog in the city. I noticed that in Los Angeles, a lot of days that the smog is heavier than others. Positive things by the humans that interact on Earth, like beach cleanups and recycling, are a big part of the human impact in a positive way. We have, over time, misused our resources and harmed our atmosphere and environment, causing us to be more susceptible to ultraviolet rays from the sun, weakening our ozone through all this pollution that we created in the air, making our water less livable for foods and things that we use out of the water. And countering that is the most important thing, I feel like, right now. And beach cleanups are pretty popular. They're fun. People do it with their friends. Recycling takes 2 minutes. Not to mention that most, if not all, homes come with recycling bins. I know specifically to New York, we had 3 bins to separate our trash. We had our regular trash, we had our plastics, and we had our paper slash cardboards. And they even gave out pictures so that you could label your trash can and see what goes where. And I feel like that is something important given that New York is confined and produces a lot of trash, but most places do. A great way to make sure that things get handled in the proper way. My counter on human impact has given examples of how day to day we can make changes for the better to better our environment. However, I do feel like there are things that need to be done on a bigger scale. Like I discussed, how trucks carry large loads of things to and fro, and how that causes a lot of pollution. I feel as though factories, there's usually a lot of smog that comes out of them, and they produce a lot of waste, as well as chemical plants who release a lot of waste, like, and that lies in the hands of larger corporations, not just the individual. And I feel like if they take accountability and educate themselves a little more and concern themselves more with the well-being of the environment instead of money or chasing the check, then the environment may be a little healthier. Yes, carpooling, recycling, cleaning up litter when you see it does help on a smaller scale, but I feel like everybody as a whole needs to work together. And the large companies, the large chemical plants, the large factories, they produce more pollution than anybody else. And that needs to change first for a big change to be made. In conclusion, I would just like to say thank you for watching my 15-minute video. I know my images are semi-graphic, but I feel like they are informative because this is really what the world looks like around us. It is unfortunate. I hope we learned some good stuff. I learned a lot by researching, and I hope it was helpful.